Happy pumpkin spice season. Dr. Miller here with a video about I'll call it a journal club. It's not really original research, but it's an article that was so well done. I wanted to throw it out here to the cyber world. You might be interested in checking out. As you may know from my channel, I'm interested in cluster set configurations and different ways of distributing volume during a set and in between sets. It's one of the set rep configurations, something I'm interested in. Some of the research says that it doesn't really matter, and I say no. I say no. I put my flag in the ground. I say that's crap. I say no, and the reality is that both of those things are true. So if you're somebody starting out, some of these advanced techniques probably are, and I say probably because I'd say almost always, not really that helpful. But if you've been training for a while, even if it's the entertainment value of switching weights and engaging with the program, it's worth it. Okay, it's worth it. So this article was in the. By the way, subscribe to my channel, like this video. You're gonna like it. You're gonna love it. So you could even commit now if you want to. Subscribe, because I need subscribers. Remember, we're chasing Lambo dreams here, and at the time of this video, I'm not close yet. So I need you to help me have a Lambo. We're doing it together, and maybe if you're in town or something, I'll let you drive it. All right. Practical application of traditional and cluster set configurations within a resistance training program. This is from the Strength and Conditioning Journal, the practical journal of the National Strength and Conditioning Association. The author is Nagatani. I just make sure I said that right. The second author is Gregory Half, who is a prominent and prevalent and prolific researcher. And so he has been a lot of it coined. I almost said coined. That's not the right word. He's been an author or researcher in cluster sets for a while. How's that? So a lot of good information. Now, the reason I want to commend this article to you, so the article is very well written. It's a good background of what cluster sets are, and all those good things. But it's the first one I've seen that has done a really nice job, and I'm flipping the pages over here. On the second and third page of this, some really helpful figures. So the first one it's called Figure 1. It's pretty good. But there's a graphical display of a traditional set, a cluster set. If you're not familiar, a cluster set in this particular graphical display, what a cluster set is a rest within a set. So you might do a set of 3. It's been around a while, but it's become more prevalent. I use it certainly quite a bit in my programming with clients and with athletes. But in weightlifting, it's been around for a long time, where you might do a set of 85% for a set of 3 reps. That's a traditional set. You would just do all 3 reps in a row. Well, the idea that quality should be maintained, and so quality like bar velocity technique, you would do 2 reps and then rest for 30 seconds and hit that last rep. Okay, so that's a cluster set. So you're still doing your 3 reps, but you're taking a 30-second break in the middle of the set. Then you rest between sets as you would traditionally. So that's a typical cluster set type of configuration. Now, there's rest pause. There's rest redistribution kind of cluster-looking configurations. There's EMOMs, right? There's all kinds of stuff. So in this picture here is two rep clusters. So let me back up. So the cluster that they first show is 1 rep, 30-second rest, 1 rep, 30-second rest, 1 rep, 30-second rest. Okay, and then there's no rest between sets, right? That's more like a rest pause type of thing where you just do all the reps in a row, but you work in small pieces of rest between smaller chunks of repetition. So 1 rep rest, 1 rep rest, so forth. You could also then do a cluster set like drawn here, where you might do a set of the same cluster of reps. They had 8 reps total is what they were using here, but you do 2 reps, you'd rest for 30 seconds, do 2 reps, rest, then you'd have the interset rest would be 180, right? So 3 minutes, and then you do the same thing. Okay, and then, to be fair, the second cluster set was a set of 4, 1 rep rest for 30 seconds, 1 rep rest, and then 180 seconds rest in between. So as well. So it's a longer rest period. And then rest redistribution would be, in this example, you're doing a rep and then you only rest for 10 seconds, rep, rest 10 seconds, then you have your a shorter 100-second rest in between the 2 different sets of 4. Okay, and the final rest redistribution configuration was kind of what I mentioned earlier, which was the rest pause, which is you do a rep and you rest, but you don't have an interset rest. Okay, so hopefully all that gobbledygook makes sense. There's just a lot of ways, in other words, to configure clusters. And so I'll talk about this second figure, which is really helpful in a second, but I want to summarize that because I think that was a bunch of gobbledygook. If you're looking at how to use clusters, you have to, and this will play into this next figure, you have to ask what you're doing with them. Okay, so I mentioned the weightlifting example a second ago where you do 2 reps at 85%, so a fairly heavy load, and then you rest for 30 seconds because you want a long enough rest to make sure the movement quality in that 3rd rep, usually the 3rd rep is when things start to fall apart in power, any sort of power movement. Okay, 3rd sprint, 3rd lift, 3rd rep, whatever. The 3rd one usually is when the person will slow down. Okay, if the reps are done in a row. And so you take that 30-second rest with the intent of that last rep is just going to be as good as the first 2, but you're not going to take a full-on rest to do it. Okay. Now you could say, let's say you're going to do 4 sets of 2 plus 1. So you do 2 reps and then rest and do the last one. So that's a total of 12 reps. Well, you could also say, well, why don't I just do 6 sets of 2 and only rest for 2 minutes instead of what I was resting for 3? That would be a rest redistribution type of configuration. Okay. You could do an EMOM, where you say, I'm going to do every minute on the minute, right? I'm going to do 1 rep. Okay, that would fit into more like the rest pause type of configuration, where you're not going to have sets per se. You're just going to have 1 big set, but you're working the rest in smaller chunks because you're taking smaller volume pieces as you go, meaning like you're only doing 1 rep at a time instead of not 2 or 3 or 5. Okay, so the rest there would be plenty for maintaining power hypothetically over time. Okay, now if you did this in strength work, now you could extend the reps perhaps. So you could do 3 reps and then plus 2. You could do a 3 plus 2. So, and the rest period would still be 30 seconds because you want to maintain movement quality for those last 2 reps. The reason it's 3 plus 2 or 4 plus 2 now is because you're not really focused on power as much. Yes, the bar will slow down, but it's more of a maximal type of lift. Okay, where the power stuff, you would probably take smaller chunks because the bar velocity or the movement velocity is what is most important. And the second one, you want to maintain the load. That's the second example, the maximal example. You could do a 4 plus 2 as long as the load is maintained. If you did a straight 6 at that particular percentage, like if you read some of the textbooks and they say 85% of 1RM, good luck with that. Okay, you're going to get crushed after about the 4th rep in the 2nd set. You're going to get hammered. Okay, so if you take that 30-second rest, you're going to have the ability to recover and then hit those last 2 reps with quality, still maintain 1 or 2 to finish. Okay, so but that's a 30-second rest. What about hypertrophy then? What I'm trying to do is frame all these different variables and how you use these clusters. Hypertrophy then, now that the reps can get a little bit longer. What do you mean by that is the clusters get bigger. So you could do a 5 plus 5. And the intraset rest now could also be reduced. Instead of a 30-second rest, the intraset rest could be reduced. Instead of 30-second rest, it'd be a 15-second rest. So you might do a 3 plus 3 plus 3. Okay. And I'll say why you might want to do that, what exercise. But let's do you do 3 reps, rack it, 15-second rest instead of 30, like you might get with a power maximal type of approach. Again, this plays in the size principle under recruitment stuff I've talked about on this channel. Go back and look at those videos if you want some background. 15 seconds, right? And then you hit the set again. So the idea there is you have a longer total set. You might get 15 reps in, but and I'm just exaggerating this, but you might get 3 reps at a time, but you're only resting 15 seconds. Then you rest your traditional set and do it again. Okay, now the thing with hypertrophy training, there appears to be more of a benefit with traditional sets, right? So the metabolic benefit from not resting provides a little bit more. And how do you quantify a little bit? This much, a little bit more for hypertrophy over time than would a cluster. Now, the caveat I have for that, and like when I program hypertrophy training for individuals, is that can you maintain the movement quality? Like if it's a back squat, if you're doing a set of 12 back squat at a load that you're going to be 2 to fail, you're going to be working, right? And those last 5 reps, technique is going to be threatened, aka your lower back is going to be threatened. So I think there are situations like this where there are trade-offs. So you could say, all right, I want to get a 12 rep set, hypertrophy driven, but I'm only going to rest 15 seconds. But in that 15 seconds, I'm going to, let's say it's a squat, I'm going to rack the bar and rest to let me reset my technique, catch my breath for a second here, and finish those last those last cluster of 6 with quality. You may even chunk it out even more, do 4 at a time to maintain movement quality. And yes, you're not going to get as great a benefit as a traditional, but it's not like it's an 80% difference. Okay. Will it make a difference over time? Yes, the answer is yes, but the trade-off is I don't have a bad lower back. If you get hurt doing something, you can't train, right? If you hurt during training, you won't want to train. So there's having done this a while, there's the optimal kind of laboratory. This is the way it should be for optimal, and then there's the reality when you hit the gym and you deal with real people and real fatigue that sometimes you have to compromise a little bit. So I might, in order to get the volume in, which is the most important, the 12 rep set, which is the most important, I might compromise some of the small gains from a straight set in order to make sure I accomplish that volume and stay healthy so I can do more volume the whole year instead of being hurt, 2 or 3 cycles in, even though I got my metabolic burn going. Okay, so, balance this stuff. All right, this stuff being all these variables. So you hear like, well, it's better to do traditional sets. Agreed. I agree with that. Traditional straight 12. But it isn't always practical. And that goes for diet. That goes for a lot of things. Okay? Just because something optimal doesn't mean that you can do it or should do it. It's optimal for me to get 8 hours of sleep each night. But sometimes that doesn't happen. It's just not practical. I got to get stuff done. Okay? I mean, that's just reality. Okay? It's optimal that I'd have a beautiful head of hair. But it's not practical. It ain't going to happen. All right. So anyway, I think you get the point. Now I say that too as I lead into this second figure. And again, this is a great paper here. I highly recommend if you can get a hold of it. It's how many pages was this? I'm trying to not including references. 98 from 87. So 11 pages. All you want to know about cluster sets, basically. But this figure 2 is very helpful. So I won't show it because I don't have copyright, but it may be able to click on NSCA's site and sometimes you can download the figures only. So I highly recommend you take a look at this, but it's a semicircle and it has across the semicircle hypertrophy, basic strength and power in the outer ring. And the next ring in, it talks about what is the benefit of each one of the configurations. So what I just been talking about, like a traditional set, standard cluster, undulating cluster, and ascending cluster. So the load, one of the things you can adjust with the cluster as well is the load within the set. So like the 2+1 with the weightlifting I was talking about a little bit ago, you could do 80% for the first 2 reps, and the third rep do 85, right? While you're resting, change the load, okay? You could also start the set heavier in order to potentiate the last rep. So you could do 85, 85, and 80 with the idea that last rep that's going to be higher bar velocity than you used to. And this doesn't always play into just weightlifting or weight training, but it can play into like sprinting and things like that too, right? You have some sort of accentuated set that's heavier than the others, trying to get this post-activation potentiation, whether it's mental or it's actual physiological or probably a combination of both, psychophysiological, it doesn't matter, is that third rep could actually be better than the first 2 instead of just holding on. Okay, so that's something to tinker with as well. In a hypertrophy set, you might do the first 5 reps heavier than the last 5. Okay, so the average percentage for the set might be 85, but you're going to do 82.5, 84, 85 for the first 5, which would be pretty heavy, but you're going to complement that with the opposite. So if I did 85 here, I do 75 with the remaining 5. Okay, and those last 5 reps probably feel a little bit lighter because it is, right? Whether that's mental or that's actually some physiological priming going on. I'll use that generic term to describe post-activation potentiation. I don't know, but it's probably both. Okay, so but anyway, the semicircle then kind of it prioritizes which would be better in hypertrophy. So in this case, traditional sets would be. If you move over to basic strength, traditional sets, standard clusters, undulating clusters, ascending clusters are all about the same benefit. I would say the clusters maybe, and I agree with that 100%, again, depends on technique as well. If you're falling apart after that third rep, might be better to take even just a 15-second cluster to reset your form technique before accomplishing the last 2 reps. And if load is most important in strength, load preservation then could happen a lot easier. As I mentioned before, I won't go down the road again. And the strength and power, though, the authors push the standard cluster set, and the ascending is better than the undulating cluster, so the load would change from rep to rep or cluster to cluster, and the traditional. And I would agree with that as well. So it just does a really nice job of showing how these clusters fit and when they're most useful and when a traditional set is most useful. The next inner ring is the reps per set. The next inner ring is the the cluster set rest period, and then the closest ring is the inter set rest period. So just, like I talked about before, the cluster, like when you rest between repetitions, it's much shorter as you move into the hypertrophy range. As you get into the strength and power range, the cluster rest, the intra-set rest becomes longer. So again, a 2 + 1 is a 30-second rest, as opposed to a hypertrophy-driven set that might be a 5 + 5 with only a 15-second rest, just to allow for, again, that reset of exercise technique. All right, so I hope that's helpful. I highly recommend this article. Go out and get it if you can. And it's not an original study, so if you're like, I don't like reading that, well, it's not. It's basically like a little manual on cluster set training and why it could be beneficial and how to manipulate the variables to get the outcome that you're interested in. And then how to do that through cycles if you're cycling or you're an athlete or whatever it may be. Not cycling on a bike, well, it could be, but cycling from emphases to emphases. That's all I got. Again, like this video if you haven't already, and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you all in the next one.